In today's video, we are going to be going over a 99 to 02 full-size GM cluster. What this originally was supposed to have was an odometer error message up on the screen. Now I covered odometer error on the 03 to 06 full-size clusters on one of my older videos, so if you have 2003 to 6 with odometer error, you gotta dig through my channel for an older video. You can find out how to fix that. But this is going to be a 99 to 02, a little different. Now, what it was described as having was error, but I have it plugged in here, and we don't have any displays at all. It's both displays are completely dead. So, and when you peek in this little slot here, if I can see if I can get a good view into there, but you can see the header pins that connect the display board to the main board. There's a set of header pins that kind of make a bend. Anyways, if you kind of get a view in there, they're all wibbly wobbly bent up. And there is some videos on YouTube showing how to fix the intermittent displays on these. And what they do is they just take and they bend the header pin to solder the backside and then bend it back. But there is a side effect to that. These boards are single-sided board, which means there's only a solderable surface on one side, just the bottom. There's no via, there's no feed through, there's no more physical support joining the top side of the board to the bottom side of the board. There's no tube in the middle, a via tube, feed through, whatever the heck it's called. So what I'm getting at is there isn't much physical strength to a single-sided circuit board. So what happens is when you put too much stress pulling on it, it actually can rip the pad and tear it. So I see very often, too often, where someone has bent the board over to solder it, bent it back, and then caused more problems because they ripped a bunch of the pads in the process. So before I can get to the error message repair, I have to fix whatever's going on with the displays. The owner did mention the display was flickering, but he must have attempted a repair before sending it off. He may have just forgotten to plug this display back in, or it is very possible that some of the ripping to the traces, to the paths, knocked out that display also. So to get started, let's just see what all we're dealing with here. Oh, so this second display, it is plugged in, but it's not working. Probably because, actually, it looks good on this side, but I'm going to unsolder it. As you see, a bent pin on the display board. It's always kind of a bit concerning because they can crack. The oxygen indicator is still black. Here, let me just unplug this. When these displays crack, this little black corner will turn white when oxygen gets inside. It is still black, so that is good. Let's see what this poor thing has been through. Yeah, I don't know. I might have to get this in the microscope to really get a good view on it, but definitely been messed with. This corner pin has some crusty flux. Just kind of, yeah, it doesn't even look like, it's just flux. I don't even see like fresh solder added. So, but there's definitely, it looks like, I'll just get it on the microscope. I'll get it on the microscope so you can see what's going on, but it kind of looks like every single pin, every single joint has pulled through a little bit, fractured. Okay, so now that the displays have been repaired, we can get on with the meat and potatoes of this video, and that is the error repair. Just to settle my own curiosity, I'm gonna see if my OBD Star X100 can read and program the miles. Probably not, but I'm just gonna try. So what's going on here is we have a corrupt EEPROM, and here's a little fun fact. When a EEPROM gets corrupted in an 03 to 06 cluster, you'll just get an odometer message similar to this. But with this 99 to 02 style cluster, a corrupt EEPROM can actually cause it to not even boot up. It's like some of the operating system is stored on the EEPROM. But this one failed in a way that it is booting up and functioning. It's just the mileage section of the EEPROM that's having issues. And my programmer says it has 900,999 kilometers. Anyway, so obviously some issues there. I'm just gonna see if it'll let me program something in there. I'm just gonna stick in 1,000 kilometers and see what happens. I don't expect it to work, but maybe it will. Huh, looks like it actually is working. So maybe I can just reprogram this without having to pull the EEPROM. Usually, when there's EEPROM issues, we'd have to pull the EEPROM and replace it. To pull the EEPROM in this model, you have to unsolder it's like a 96 pin connector on this daughter board, which is kind of a pain, but I'm gonna try putting in the correct mileage and see if it'll stick. So this vehicle has 134K, and I need to program it, convert it to kilometers for this tool to work. All right, so this should come up as 134. Yes, go. All right, there we go. Okay, and there it is. So next, I am going to disconnect this. And I'm going to add some miles up on it. I'm going to set it up with my signal generator to count miles, just to make sure that there's no funny business going on with the odometer counting. And now I just wait for the odometer to count. We'll add a couple miles, get it up to like 252. Okay, so I got it up to 52. Just gonna reset the trip. And then I'm gonna power it down and power it up. Yep, okay, it stored it. Seems to be okay. Now, if this was not recoverable, it would have been quite a bit bigger process. Like I mentioned earlier, you'd have to remove the daughter board. But to get a new replacement EEPROM, you need a good cluster to copy the bin file from, and then copy it onto a new EEPROM, install the new EEPROM, and you either have to set the miles before you install the EEPROM, or like with the tool I used earlier, you can program it through the port. So now I can continue on with the repair, start assembling. It's also worth mentioning now that in 1999, that year only, the airbag light operates different from the 2000, 2001, 2002. You can usually tell the year by the airbag LED. If there's two LEDs, it's probably a 99. If it's just one airbag LED, it's probably a 2001 or 2. But the programming in the EEPROM is going to be different. So if you have a 99, make sure you use a 99 bin file. Also, the bin file will be different if the cluster has trans temp. So you can use a trans temp file on a non-trans temp cluster, but you can't go the other way. If you use like a 1500 bin file on your 2500, your trans temp isn't going to work. This is a testing jig I've made for testing these EEPROMs. This is just a socket to drop the EEPROM into. It's on the top side of this daughter board. Otherwise, the EEPROM's on the bottom, so this just puts it up top where you can get to it. Anyways, I can show you what happens when the EEPROM is completely corrupt to the point where it can't function, and what this generation of cluster will do is just sit on the battery. The odometer screen won't power up, and any of the gauges that require the serial bus, like the temperature and the fuel, will not work. Now the analog gauges like the oil and the volt, they will continue to work, and I believe the mile per hour and RPM will work too. They don't need the serial bus, but this will also not work. Anyways, so if you're just stuck on a battery symbol like this and half your cluster's not working, it's a dead EEPROM. Before I completely reassemble, I'm just going to check the condition of these air core motors. Okay, so fuel, actually there's a little bit of glue separation in the face. It almost looks like there's a bubble popping up right here. So the fuel is definitely doesn't have any of that dampening grease left in it. Everything else feels pretty good. Mile per hour could use some. Tachometer, yeah. So these three gauges here are going to need a little help. The dampening grease in them is no longer doing its job. Because it's supposed to be like this, where it's got a little cushion to it. So when these are new from the factory, they have a grease in them. There is a metal disc inside the plastic housing, and they surround it with grease, and that's what keeps the needles from being twitchy. Now, after time, you know, these things are all 20 years old now, and they're right next to a hot incandescent lamp. Over time, that grease kind of just is no longer grease. It doesn't work good at smoothing out the needle movement. So what we can do is inject some oil in there. It's not as good as the grease, but it's better than no grease at all, or no dampening fluid of any kind anyways. So it's better than nothing. I wish we could just order up new replacement motors for a reasonable price, but you can't. They've been discontinued for a long time, and every once in a while you can find these brand new, but they're ridiculously expensive. So we just kind of are stuck with what we got. I'm using, a lot of people ask me, what oil do I use? Well, I don't really recommend the oil that I'm currently using. It's not quite as heavy as I'd like. See, that's much better than, let's see here, we'll see what it looks like with no oil. So this is before oil's added, and this is with oil added. So it's not quite as stiff as a grease, but it's definitely better than this, because this will give you a very twitchy, bouncy gauge. Anyways, what was I saying? So the oil I use, everybody asks me, what oil do I use? I'm using an ADW 90 gear lube. And it's not quite as heavy as I would like. So basically go as heavy and thick as you possibly can that will still get pushed and sucked through a syringe. So take that information and run with it. So just get the heaviest, thickest oil that you can push into the motor is basically all it comes down to. So here I'm first kind of pull the syringe up to suck the air out, and then I push it back down to replace that vacuum I just created with oil. And I do that a few times. I kind of try to work the air out of there. So I'm sucking out the air and pushing in oil. So you see some air bubbles pop up and then push down. Do that about 3-4 times, and after that then it's about as good as it's gonna get. Okay, one more air bubble came out, and then I push down, kind of hold. Okay, so let's check it now. See, it doesn't just make a bunch of spins, it just makes a turn and stops. So definitely an improvement over no oil at all. This next step is important, and we're going to be setting the needles. Before I forget to mention, so not all of these motors are the same, and they are directional. So pay attention to not only what gauge you pull them out from, but what direction the little nameplate is pointing. All right, so to set the needles, right now I have the cluster powered up, but there's no signals going to it. There's no mile per hour or RPM signals, and there's no of the serial bus signals. So these two are reading because they're strictly analog and don't care about anything. But the fuel, mile per hour, and tach, the ones that we are reseating the needles on, are going to be at their home or zero position right now. So we will, that is where we're going to insert the needles. And the RPM and mile per hour, you'll seat it so that it's just a hair off of the pin when it's in its floating natural state. You want it, I actually have this one a little bit high, so I have to redo it, but you want it just a titch below the 0 dash. So I have to pull it up, and when I pull it up, the motor kind of spins back to its home position. So I'm gonna try again, and not quite. So I'm trying to get it so it's will rest between the final dash and the pin. So right there I have it. So I'm gonna go ahead and seat it down, but don't push it all the way down, because then it's gonna drag on the face of the gauge, and then you're gonna have problems. Same with the mile per hour. I'm just kind of aiming for between the pin and the 0 dash. And I was just a little bit off. I'm gonna try one more time. So there, its natural floaty position is right in between, so that's perfect. And I'm gonna go ahead and I'm using the microfiber cloth to kind of help me prevent from pushing the needle all the way down, and to prevent me from getting fingerprints all over the face. Now the gas, this we want it so that it naturally sits just a titch below the E mark. So right about there. Yep, perfect. So it's just a titch below that orange dash. Okay, needles are set. Today's repair is wrapped up. Here I've just plugged in my serial bus tester, got my signal generator going again, just to give this cluster one final check after it's been assembled. So I'll give it some RPM a mile per hour signals. That's looking good. And here I'll adjust the temperature. Yep, so we're getting communication, and yep, everything is looking good. And yep, odometer is still correct. If you want to tackle this repair yourself, I will include an Amazon affiliate link down below to the programmer that I used today. The model number changed a little bit and the color changed a little bit, but I believe it's still the same. I'll give it a check over, but I've had that tool for a long time now, so there's been some small changes. And if you don't feel comfortable doing it yourself, I will include my email down below, and you can contact me for a quote. But I think that wraps up today's video, and thank you all for watching.